use point, then you actually give the where you want to get the data from. So in that case it will be the vops op, and then you want to get the floating point number, so in that case it will be $pt, and then what you want to get after that is the string attribute, which in that case will be rotate, just the same way we named it in Houdini, in vops, the attribute, and the floating index is 0 because it's a float attribute. So and that would actually get the data straight out from vops. Right now, if I actually go ahead and delete that and actually put a $ on this and say rotate, you can actually see Houdini doesn't even know what you're talking about. If I press enter, it actually says undefined variable on the wave object. So what you need to go ahead and do is actually, you can actually use the point expression, or you can actually drop in an attribute create right here, right in between, before you go to the vops, right, and name this attribute rotate, same way you're gonna name it in vops. Right now, what this does is create a variable mapping right here, which is called rotate, and the uppercase letters rotate, and now that flows through. And now if you come over here, this is actually green, meaning the data is actually flowing as it's supposed to. Now copy swap actually does one thing. Okay, for now you can actually visualize, but what we're gonna go ahead and do is actually, for one, before I actually stamp the thing, let's go ahead and color these boxes some colors, so that way we can actually visualize the data as it's supposed to be. Because for right now we really can't tell whether they're flipping or not, so we actually need to go ahead and group the boxes. Now we have to group the boxes. I'm gonna go back to here, not the boxes but the box. We're gonna have to group the box. Now this particular box, as of right now, has primitive numbers, which you're gonna use to advantage in that particular case. Now I'm gonna go ahead and group the primitives for the up and bottom and the sides, as you would typically do. Then I'm gonna be right back after I finish that. Okay, so this is actually how you would actually typically do the thing usually in Houdini. So you actually get a group SOP, name it whatever you want to name it, put the name of the group number, or in that case it's all primitive, right? So I just look at the viewport and see what number you want. So in that case 5 for the up group, so up is 5, down is 4, and the rest of the polys is just whatever number it is. So we just went ahead like so, and the rest of the polys are so, and you just get that whatever is and group them and then color them, put them on the primitive class, and it's all nice and dandy, and you get that as a result. Now there's some visual effects contests that actually put out. I've never entered one, but I've seen them say like 42 nodes and no more than 42 nodes and make this animation of this one thing. So now in our case, having done use 6 SOP nodes as it is, you're down to 30 something nodes which you actually have to use. And honestly, being that you're coloring the whole thing like so, that ain't gonna work. I don't know about you, but that ain't gonna work. Now easiest way out would actually be to create a one node that actually does all of that in one go, and that way you actually have 41 nodes left to actually play with Houdini. Now that's a lot of advantages to that, because that way you can actually, well, forget about that. Let's go ahead and focus on creating the whole thing Pythonically, so we can actually recreate the whole thing, same effect over here but in Python. So in our case, we're gonna go ahead, file, new operator type, and we're gonna name it anything. So we're gonna name it cube my colors. Where do you come up with these names? Cube my colors, and then we're gonna give it a label of my cube colors. So cube colors, let's name it like that. And yeah, cube colors. I know it's not an O, it's a U in there, and it's a geometry whatever, and it's, we're gonna name it cube color, and it's gonna be only the curry file only, and accept. Now if I tab in the over here, I gotta we just made this up literally right now. We just made it up. It was not there when I actually started this whole thing, so we just made it up. So it's right there, my cube colors. So I might go ahead and drop it in, so you can actually tab it in, and if you know what the name is, if you can actually just whatever, so it's my, you can see, just tap it in normally like you would, and that's the same name that you named right here. So whatever you put over here is the same thing, you should get it tapped in right here. Now under icons, you can set up your own icons, but we ain't gonna go bother about that. So now let's go ahead to the code section, and we're gonna actually begin this whole thing by doing what? Creating attributes. Now this doesn't have any attributes as of right now, so we're gonna go ahead and create some attributes for that. And the way we're gonna do this, actually, if I go ahead pop in my Python shell, so Alt Shift P to get my Python shell out, what we're gonna go ahead and do is drop in a fast attribute, which will be a primitive attribute, class attribute. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is actually name this attribute, well, not name it, but give it a name, a variable which you can actually refer to, which is actually add, let's call it add prim color, right? And then we're gonna go ahead and say to geo is where we want to put this at, right? So to geo, what we want to do is actually, so now the geo is actually the geometry, the points, the vertices, the primitives, everything. So in our case, we want to go ahead and add attrib, which is add attribute. And what kind of attribute you want to put? Now you can actually put any kind, but it'll be an attrib type of prim. Now most of this stuff you can actually, if you use the text shell a whole lot, you actually, that's how you actually get to figure out most of the stuff that you can actually do to geometry and data and what kind of, whatever type of stuff you need. So now it's a primitive that you want to deal with, and you can actually go ahead and name the, you have to name it originally like you actually, you know, name the color in Houdini typically. So capital C, small d, and it's a tuple obviously because it's a 3 float RGB. So in our case, you can give it any color. I'll just give it black. So 0.0, 0.0, and 0.0, and close the tuple and close the add attribute function over here. Okay, you always make sure that's closed. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do is actually add the groups for the thing before we add the colors. Now in our case, up is gonna be the first group, and to up, all we're gonna do is actually add a group to the geometry. So to geo, what we're gonna do is actually create. Now this kind of stuff, I'm gonna just go ahead and showcase it real quick. So now you can say geo is equals to, I can go ahead and drag in my grid right here. Oh, let's drop the cube in that case because that's what we're dealing with. So actually it's easy to whatever. So geo dot, all we're gonna get is the geometry, right? What we want to get is the geometry of the cube. So now everything that the cube has is actually carried in this object called geometry. I don't know why I keep on calling variables. Okay, now this is an object now. So this particular object, the geo, you can add an attribute which can be of any kind. So you can actually attribute type, then the name, then the default value. Transformation, these are variables that you actually put in depending on whether you want to put them or not. So in our case, attribute type will be who dot attrib type. As you can see, that's a type, right? That's what you want to put out. Dot. Now what you gonna, depending on what kind of attribute you want to put up, in our case it's prim, right? Then as if you remember what it said earlier, it actually said attribute type then the name. So in our case, the name is a string value, which is a CD, and the default value, so you can actually put a 0, but in our case it will just refuse because geometries are read only. So you actually have to do this over here. So now geo, we can actually do the same thing again, dot create, and you can see what you can create with the geo. So you can actually create everything, and here's what we want: create prim group. Okay, now I don't think this will, let's see whether it will let me. Well, geometries are read only, so I cannot actually do that over there, so I have to come on over here and do that. So create prim group, and the prim group name in our case is going to be called up, right? Now I'm really lazy, so I'm gonna copy this, and the laziest programmer is the best programmer, paste it two times, name this down, and replace this with down. And this one, I want to name it rest of polys. And okay, going back to my session, and this one is rest of polys. Now if I click apply, if there's no typos, I should have, for one, an attribute color, a primitive attribute called color. Alright, and 3 groups, up, down, and rest of polys, just sort of like we named them over here. So we just created 3 groups. Okay, now we're gonna have to work on every single primitive. In our case, we only got 4 primitives, but we're gonna work on the primitives explicitly. So now this is not really gonna work as a plugin kind of thing, because the primitive changes probably on some of the cases, and so in our case, just the shortcut. Now we're gonna go through all the primitives. So for prim, and now if you like your work being a little bit easier, you can actually go ahead and make prims is equals to geo.prims, and get the function prims to get all the primitives inside the box, inside the object called geo. Now you can actually just go ahead and reference the prims, and now you can actually just go ahead loop through the whole number of primitives inside over here. Now you can actually use another loop in here. So if statement, in our case it's not a for loop, but it's a condition statement. So if the prim dot number is equals to, in our case we're gonna get, let's say, up group, which is group 5. So if it's 5, you can start with anything. So you can actually start by setting up the color for that. So you can actually say prim dot set attribute